Welcome to Bedtime Stories. The Clever Beggar. Once upon a time, a king had a daughter who was so intelligent, so wise and so clever that people tried to avoid her because of nervousness. She could confuse anyone, even the king's wise men. And when it came to suitors, their knees shook when they tried to speak to her because the princess was so clever. The king worried that his daughter would always be alone. So one day he decided to issue a proclamation. He sent his servants out to kingdoms far and wide to announce the challenge. Anyone who could win an argument with the princess would win not only his daughter's hand in marriage, but half of his kingdom. Young men from far and wide came to try their wit and wiles on the princess' intellectual ability. And day after day, they appeared and offered arguments and counter-arguments to the princess' argumental debate, but the princess always had the last word and she always won the debates. The king greeted each suitor. He stood nearby and watched. And after a while, the suitors' arguments became sillier and sillier. The whole endeavor exhausted the king. From now on, he announced, only serious men must apply. If anyone offers a silly argument, he will be punished and sentenced to imprisonment. Soon the number of suitors grew smaller and smaller. But one day, a young, handsome beggar heard about the king's challenge. He decided to try his luck. What do I have to lose? He asked himself. If I lose, I shall only be punished, and my life is already a punishment for me. He set off for the palace. As he was walking, he came upon a dead crow in the road, and because he knew this was some kind of sign, he stopped to think. Crows could be bad luck, but surely a dead crow meant the opposite. So he decided to take along this good luck charm, and threw the dead crow into his sack. He had not walked far when he came upon an old bathtub lying by the side of the road. You never know when you'll need a bath, he said to himself, and he dragged this along. He decided whatever he found in his path, he would take along, and so as he made his way toward the palace, he collected a rug, a ram's horn and a rusty flute. The beggar was feeling very confident and well prepared, though everyone he passed thought him a fool. That night, when he stopped at a farm and asked the farmer if he could stay the night, the farmer asked where he was headed. To woo the princess, the beggar said. The farmer and his wife rolled their eyes. That will get you in trouble, said the farmer. But the beggar grinned and said, I'll win, I've no doubt about it. After all, I have a mouth under my nose and a tongue in my mouth, haven't I got this God's gifts? And the next day, he appeared at the palace. The servants rolled their eyes at the beggar's sight, but no one could stop him, and so at long last he was presented before the princess. Greetings, he said, O pretty woman with hands of ice. She stared at him. What do you mean by that? My hands are warm, perhaps, he said, but too cold to roast a crow. She stared harder. My hands are warm enough to roast a crow, she argued, and the beggar grinned and lifted the dead crow out of his sack. Let's see, he said. The princess shook her head. She would not let a beggar make a fool of her. I cannot touch this crow, she said, for if I do, he'll roast, and the fat will drip upon the floor. No problem then, the beggar said. We'll catch the fat in this. And he presented the bathtub. The princess laughed, and the king smiled to see his daughter's pleasure. But that tub will leave marks on the floor, she said, and the beggar only bowed. We'll set it on this rug, he said, and he pulled the rug from his sack and set it beneath the tub's feet. The princess shook her head. She saw he was getting better of her, and she said, I see that you're twisting your tongue while talking. And so the beggar reached into his sack and pulled out the ram's horn and said, There is nothing more twisted than this, yet it is sound and fine. The princess studied the beggar and saw that he was also sound and fine. Beneath the grime on his face there was a handsome lad, and beneath his shabby clothes there was a strong and able young man. And, oh, what a sense of humor and a prompt and witty response. She loved that about him. Yes, the ram's horn is sound, and it is fine, she said, but a ram's bleat is piercing and cold. The beggar said, no other sound is as pleasant and melodious as the flute. The beggar pulled the rusty and dusty flute out of his sack, and he played a pretty melodious tune. As the princess listened, she knew she was falling in love with him. He's won my heart, she said to the Father King. And now he has won your hand in marriage and half my kingdom too. The king cried joyfully. The beggar played a still more beautiful tunes, got married to the princess, and with half of the king's kingdom they lived happily ever after. If you like the story, please do like, share and subscribe. Thank you for listening. Good night.